sermon, We Are a Justice-Seeking People. Sorry I couldn't be with you yesterday, B. I forgot I was writing a sermon and needed some time to work on it, so glad you had a great time. But I spent the morning with a number of friends. 3 or 4 of us drove up towards the airport to a kind of, it's not a food bank, it's an organization that provides meals all over the world. It's called Rising Up. And we together, not the 4 of us, there were folks from all over the place, probably about 35 or 40 of us, we packaged 10,000 meals. Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, it's like, you know, I think that they resurrected Henry Ford from the dead in order to create this system and this organizational piece. It was absolutely glorious. And as you can imagine, everybody that was there was happy. They played great music, so you're almost dancing. And every time we did 1,000 meals, they hit this gong and everybody cheered. And you left with this extraordinary sense that we left, all of us left with this sense that we had made a difference. We had kind of hit our hammer against the rock, the huge rock of social injustice. I love that expression that I think most of you are aware of, where 2 people are walking on the beach and they're talking about hope and possibility, and guy picks up the starfish and throws it in the water, and his friend says, well, you know, what good is that? Look at all the starfish that are left. And the person says, yeah, but it was pretty good for him. It's a good story. But it could be turned upside down if we change our language. What I've been talking about is social service. Someone's in need. We bring provisions to them of some sort, personal, emotional, physical, that relieve the symptoms of their need, and we serve them. Something different is what we sang about a moment ago, and that is social justice. Social justice. Social justice is the fact that despite the fact that the one starfish went into the water, the question remains, what about all those other starfish? And what is wrong with our system that they're sitting there dying in the sun? I had occasion to see a debate between William F. Buckley and Paul Robeson. I'm not sure if those names are familiar to all of you. William F. Buckley is the source of, one would argue, the current Republican Party, at least one of the initiators and drivers of what pushed the Republican Party away from what it was. Paul Robeson is one of the greatest thinkers of his generation, African-American thinker and writer. And they came together in 1965 at Cambridge to have a debate. And what I want to pull out from the debate is something that Robeson said. Now, remember, this is 1965, and you know that in 1964, the Voting Rights Act had passed. And there was an extraordinary amount of hope. That law was locked in so that it was not possible that injustice could happen anymore in the voting booth. And Robeson stood there and said, do you really think that the country, that the United States of America and its people and its culture will respond any differently to what happened in 1964 than they did to what happened in 1866? In 1866, the 14th Amendment was passed. An amendment to the Constitution, with very clear statements of the rights of every human being, both people of various races and different sexes. Very clear, unmistakable. Robeson in 65 is looking at the Voting Rights Act and says, the 14th Amendment didn't work, this won't work either. And here we are in 2022, and the starfish are scattered all over the sand, and the voting rights of African Americans are being constricted like the noose from the hangman around the neck of a nation. When I went to undergraduate school, I looked for a degree in social work, and I wanted to have a sub-focus on community organizing because I was a person who had a passion for social justice. As a person who believed in God, it was the most difficult and painful, constantly painful reality in my life that people starved. The number I heard yesterday was 820 million people today will go without adequate food. They will go to bed hungry. Not hungry like you and I feel when we're hungry and it's lunchtime, it's time to eat, but hungry like there's nothing there and the pit of your stomach aches. And you have to decide if you're going to eat yourself or feed your children, or perhaps choose between one child and the other. And that's where our world is today. That level of injustice, which is only one expression of the depth of injustice. It doesn't count the countless millions of refugees, et cetera, et cetera. You could make the list as well as I can. Where is justice? Where is justice? My ethics professor was a remarkable man in many, many ways. I had the pleasure of taking a special course with him where there were just 5 or 6 of us in the group together. And in the course of that study, one of the things he said was, wait a minute, we're talking about seeking justice here, and we're talking about the success we long for. And he said, read the scriptures, look at history, and please recognize that there's no promise of success. There is a calling to strive, but there is no promise of success. And the question is, will you still strive if that's what you're pushing against? I remember my first church, and I said things along those lines in 2 or 3 of my early sermons, and the lead pastor, the rector, who was about 55 at the time, kind of pulled me aside and said, listen, I don't know what your problem is with success. And he went through a whole list of successes that our country has experienced, and yada, 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 and he read me this. Didn't read me the Riot Act, but he was befuddled by what I was talking about. And I will tell you that it put me back, and I began to think. And as my life went on, I know that in my years as a minister, while I did engage in movements towards social justice, particularly for victims of domestic violence, most of what I did was I tried to succeed. My goal was a healthy church of positive interaction and people loving each other, all that we really try to do here, to be a community, which is in itself an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. And when one can be community at Bee's house, then it is a beautiful success, and it is a lovely, wonderful, remarkable thing to see. But it is not social justice. And I admit in my inner self to my own fear and my own frustration and my own, I guess it's giving up. I guess it's not having the courage to keep on going, because you pound your head against the wall and your head starts to hurt. You say, well, at least if I can feed 10,000 people, at least I feel like I'm making some difference. And you look to politicians and you see a few things going forward, and you see right now it's all just going back again. And Paul Robeson was so damnably right. So right. So right. In my kind of playing around on the internet, looking up the word courage, I was turned towards To Kill a Mockingbird. You know it, I think. I'm going to talk about the movie version because if I was assigned it when I was in high school, I didn't read it because I didn't read much of anything that I was assigned to in high school at all. But I did see the movie, and I've seen it more than once, and now I've seen it again. I cried in front of it last night because it is so powerful. It is so powerful. Gregory Peck as Atticus, calm, peaceful, directed, pointed. He takes on a case of Tom Robinson, who has been accused of raping a white woman. And in a conversation with Scout, his daughter, it becomes obvious that she's confused by all of it, of course, trying to figure out what's going on here. And at one point he says something to the effect that, I'm not doing this because I think I'm going to succeed. I'm doing this because it is the right thing to do. And throughout the entire movie, you see Atticus move forward and Scout as well, in a relationship with Boo. And the whole flow of the movie is one of courage in the face of a hopeless situation. There was no hope in that story, which was based upon the author's real-life experience of her childhood and could have been written 1,000 times from 1,000 experiences of black men who were accused and lynched and murdered, falsely accused, lynched and murdered. The story is ubiquitous. Harper Lee simply tells us one of them. And so, if our series this month is going to be about courage, I challenge myself to be honest about it. The list of types of courage that we are required that I did in the reading was good. Intellectual courage, moral courage, it all made good sense. And I do think we exhibit courage that way. But my challenge to myself is, can I find it within myself to give my heart and my soul and my time and my thinking and my creativity and whatever it is that God gives me, that I might strive for justice, knowing that, as Robeson said, it's probably not going to happen. I love We Shall Overcome. I love We Shall Overcome. It was sung in the early 60s when we actually thought we could. We didn't hear Robeson in his prophecy. We are now where we are. We must continue to fight. We must continue to demand. We must continue to go to places that are uncomfortable. We need to give up our time and protest, and we need to take our time and do the kind of things that our own Jack Garron is doing in relationship to the legislature. We must do those things. I challenge you to find what you are personally called to. But know this: we are a courageous people. We are a courageous people. And like Atticus, our calling is not to succeed. Our calling is to strive and to act and let the forces of life determine whether success is realized. We are all called to act with courage, to act with conviction, despite whatever will or will not happen. please join me in my own self-deprecating, honestly self-questioning way, and ask yourself, what can I do? What little thing can I do? Not to forget social services, not to forget 10,000 meals, not to forget the single starfish, but to ask, what can I do so that people simply would never starve, because the world is such that we would never allow it to happen.